all going to jail. But yeah, with the next episode we're gonna cover actually making reference to this film, we figured that it was high time that we took a look at this movie, even though we probably should have done this back between episodes 21 and 22, as that was when this film was originally released, but if you can't tell, we're terrible at scheduling things around here, so just deal with it. Not to mention, they also do make reference to the end of this film in episode 40 of this series, so it actually does benefit us to look at it a little later so that it will remain a little fresh in our minds, so it kind of works out, right? But yeah, on that note, let's actually discuss a little about how this film was originally released. The Ojamajo Doremi Sharp movie was originally released at the 2000 Summer Toy Anime Fair, which was basically an overblown film screening for a bunch of their anime properties at the time. At this particular iteration of the event, the headline act was actually the Digimon 02 film, or as we know it here in the States, the latter half of the Digimon movie. By the way, thank you Discotek for making a proper re-release of these movies. Oh, the nostalgia juices are going to overflow when I hear those old voice actors. But yeah, the Digimon 02 movie was actually split into two parts, with this film basically acting as an in-between buffer. And because of this format of being crammed in between a different hour-long feature, this movie wasn't exactly a feature length, only clocking in at about 28 minutes or so not that much longer than the average episode of the show proper, hence why we can just review this like any other episode of the series. Granted, it does lead to a few issues I have with this film, but we'll get to that in due time. Anyway, the film opened, I guess kind of with the usual cold opener of the queen introducing the big MacGuffin of this film, the Witch Queen Heartflower, through a needless panning out shot of her castle. That's some good 2000 CG there, boy. Anyway, you know this movie is a special event when not only is it in widescreen, but also had Pop miraculously being awake for her next witch exam. We didn't actually get to see her take it, which seemed to involve her properly IDing a magical frog, as instead our focus went to Hana, who managed to sneak into the witch's world behind her. I'm guessing she wanted to see her old birthing grounds, and also set off the events of this film. And this is why you gotta show your kids Beauty and the Beast when they're young. What about the remake? What remake? But yeah, I guess Pop's exam and then picking this flower took more than a few hours, as we cut over to the rest of the Ojamajo having an emergency meeting over Hana seemingly having disappeared that morning. Of course, this was quickly resolved when the two returned from the witch's world, but then... Seriously, y'all really want to make me use that clip again?
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, let's just get this out of the way. My biggest issue with this film is the forced melodrama. It's an issue I've had with many toy productions, and this is one of the more egregious examples. Now, truth be told, I could totally see this drama playing out between the Harukaze sisters over Hana, with how it has been established how Jerremi is protective of her daughter. However, it slips into needless melodrama territory because of the format of this film. A conflict like this needs to properly establish stuff like the timing and the emotions of the characters beforehand. As I said, we're not really made privy to how much time into the day has passed, and therefore it's hard to feel the urgency of the Ojamajo realizing that Hana was gone. We're basically just told stuff like, oh, they're worried, oh, there's Hana, oh no, the sisters are fighting because Jerremi is frankly acting incredibly unreasonable. Yeah, all of this, by the way, happens over the course of less than a minute. You really can't have a big quote-unquote shocking moment like this when there really hasn't been that much time to let any of this stuff sink in or breathe. It just feels way too forced, and as a result, I can't really feel bad for anyone in this scene. This scene might have worked if it happened more into the middle of an actual episode of the series, like maybe 10 minutes in, but because this film also needed to cram in a bunch of other plot elements that we'll get to, they just had to shoehorn this into the first few minutes, because a film like this also needs to have drama, even though it is more just a buffer for a film that actually has some well built up drama. TLDR, you can't force me to feel the drama of this scene if you don't do the proper legwork. Otherwise, you're just gonna make me roll my eyes so hard I can see the back of my skull. I get what they're trying to do, placing more focus on the sisters, but the execution here is just lacking. Anyway, the kind of main conflict of the film started up when Pop ended up wishing that Doremi would turn into a mouse, and I think this thing should have been called the monkey's paw flower. And after getting the Tom treatment from Majorika pulling out all the Sakuga, Jerremi met her greatest adversary.
Right now, I think we really need to find Mimi, as I'm pretty sure she's being turned into a loli as we speak.
Needless to say, this was the best part of the film, as not only did it have some of the best animated sequences, it also had some of the best comedy, as after granting one selfish wish, the flower pulled a poison ivy and sought more. Majorika would later explain that as it granted more and more selfish wishes, it would go from white to darker colors.
Oh, come on, it ain't that bad. I mean, all you really have to do is tell everyone to retract their wishes and they'll unconditionally listen. I mean, that's what Wonder Woman 1984 told me.
Nah, of course, this town was full of a bunch of selfish a-holes who ended up exploiting the evil weed in the worst ways possible. The rest of the Ojamajo tried to stop the unholy abomination before it could spread more of its evil, but because this movie was more focused on the sisters, these three had to be dumbed down. On that note, Pop, wanting to make up for her mistakes, tried to find Jerremi without being seen.
Or, you know, you could just cast an invisibility spell on yourself, but then I guess we wouldn't have another conflict for this film.
So, yeah, she managed to lure out her rodent sister, with of course some steak, but because they were about the same size, they ended up falling into the sewers together. From there, rather than casting a spell to turn both, or at least one of them, fully back to normal, Pop just turned her sister back into a mouse-sized human. And they were just stuck like this because Pop just so happened to run out of spheres.
See what I mean when I say the conflicts in this film are pretty forced?
I mean, it's one thing if these characters screw up once in easily avoidable fashion, that I could forgive and more write off for comedy, but when a lot of contrivances start to pile up, then it just makes it feel all too forced and just there for the sake of setting up this admittedly nice exchange between the Harakaze sisters, where Pop aired out all of her grievances towards her sister, that I just can't fully enjoy when the setup to it was so poorly executed. They also just kind of threw in the aforementioned scene meant to lead into episode 40 of the series proper, which when they already have everything else going on in this film, it does feel a little intrusive. Not nearly as much as everything else in this film, and I will admit, I'm mostly going to give it a pass because at least we got to see the origins of one of the most important elements of the show, as after a horribly botched piano recital, her parents took her out for a consolation dinner.
And this is why you don't feed those little brats expensive foods when they're young. I still have to go buy ikra every time I see the niece.
We'll talk more about these events in the actual episode, but yeah, this was a great origin for Doremi's steak obsession, basically acting as a comfort food after a traumatic experience. It's hilariously tragic. Anyway, we then again got one of the major saving graces of this film, the animation. Yeah, throughout this, they really flexed the fact that they got a movie budget that let them have more Sakuga than any singular episode of the series proper. And this action sequence of them escaping from some viciously adorable sewer rats had easily the most impressive frames in the film. It was also a good character moment for Doremi, showing her resolve to save both her sister and daughter, though she did need some help from the latter and a green monster. No, not that overused meme! But yeah, the rest of the Ojamajo found them and the monkey paw flower. Doremi managed to zawald it before it could spread its seeds and make more of itself. So of course, now they just needed to burn the thing before it could cause any more damage and...
How much needless drama does this film need?
Yes.
I mean, okay, I'm kind of exaggerating, as this does feel like the natural resolution to the main conflict of this film that has been this flower, with Pop understandably feeling that she started all of this with her selfish wish that led to this innocent flower becoming corrupted. It's just that, on top of everything else, it makes it feel like one of the biggest melodramatic productions Toei has ever made. But yeah, after a lot of tears, they managed to revert the flower back to its original form and ended the film with what would be the cold opener for episode 40 of the show proper that would air over 4 months after this film. So yeah, that's some future proofing.
Okay, so as not to sound totally negative, I will say, while I didn't really care for this film, I also can recognize why it turned out the way it did.
Like, I almost get the feeling that this was going to be a proper feature-length film, but was reduced down to just being an intermission for the Digimon Zero 2 movie. Thus, I could understand some of the distractingly rushed plot points in this film, and even appreciate some of the better elements like the animation.
It doesn't totally excuse all my issues with the writing, but I'll be nice and say it was a decent low effort.
Really, when the headline act is the debut of easily one of the coolest armor evolutions ever, then they're pretty much being labeled as a second fiddle. Which is a shame, because for anyone who went to the toy anime fair and were unfamiliar with this series, this could have acted as a great introduction. As is, it had some of the essentials like the wacky spellcasting and comedy of the show proper, which was delivered with stuff like Mouse Doremi and the Flowers antics, but the character building was lacking, as not only was the sisters' arc rush, but they really didn't do much of anything with the rest of the Ojamajo. Tomajorika had more of a presence and added more to the story than them. It really does feel like it was meant to be at least an hour-long film, like the movie it was forcibly sandwiched in between. If it had that time, it could have properly built up stuff like Doremi blowing up at her sister, and maybe even getting an actual reason for them getting stuck in the sewers, rather than Pop just making all of the wrong choices. It didn't present the Harakaze sisters in the best light, even though there are some good bones here for a better story between the two. And while it certainly looked great, I mean, there's a reason we use clips from the ending sequence in the credits of these videos, it was overall a pretty mediocre film that at least had the benefit that there was a much better, incredibly heart-wrenching Digimon film to watch afterwards. Again, really looking forward to that Discotech release.
Hope you all are having a nice week. For me, it's at least been a little more peaceful, at least compared to others.
As a result, we should be able to get out a few good analysis videos before things really start to get busy with some of the new shows coming soon.
Look forward to them, and until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and could you do that somewhere else? And stop playing that licensed music!